Okay, so last time we started talking about Darwin, we started talking about Lamarck and his ideas and how they influence Darwin's ideas. So just to kind of review some things about Darwin. So Darwin did talk about evolution. Now, when we talk about evolution, I don't want you to think Darwin was like, okay, yeah, we are going to make these super mutants and humans are just going to be these gigantic organisms and they're going to overpower everything. And that's how evolution occurs. That's not what Darwin said. So with Darwin's ideas, guys, we went through different adaptations. And we'll talk about adaptations a little bit more. But for evolution to happen, okay, the environment is going to act upon what we already have. So for humans especially, we are not going to get any big changes happening to us over the course of our lifetime or the next generation or the next generation or the next generation after that. It's going to take thousands upon thousands of years for us to get any changes in us. So what I mean by this, guys, is in order for a change to happen in us, we have to have some type of mutation in our DNA that actually would change a phenotype. If there's no change in our phenotype through a mutation, then nothing is going to change with us. So most of the time, how evolution is actually going to occur is that we are going to have two different traits, and one of those traits is going to be more advantageous than the other trait. So one trait's going to be better than the other one. When we have one trait that is going to be better than the other one, the trait that is better, that person's going to survive, that person's going to reproduce, and that trait is then passed on to the next generation. The one that is not as good, that trait is actually going to not get passed on, and that trait will later become less prominent or less plentiful in the population, and that trait will later disappear or die off. Okay, so that's pretty much evolution in a nutshell. What Darwin said is that species are able to change over time. And this is what we mean by that. He wasn't talking about us changing into like mutant animals or anything like that. He was just talking about things changing. Now, over the course of generations and generations and generations and thousands of years, yes, we will look a little bit different through mutations and the environment changing. But on a shorter term scale, evolution just occurs with modifying the traits that we already have. So just so you guys know, this was actually published in a paper a long time ago, but Darwin never said we came from monkeys, okay? He said we share a common ancestor with monkeys, and that there was another organism that shared a common ancestor with that organism. So it was just modification over generations upon generations. And you guys have seen this picture before that, well, maybe not with Darth Vader at the end, but that we came from monkeys, and this is not true, okay? We did not descend from monkeys. We share a common ancestor with monkeys. So in other words, if we wanted to kind of draw a little tree here on what things would look like, okay? All right, this is, we'll just say long ago. And up here, this would be like present day. All right, somewhere right here in the fork in the road, we diverged where monkeys and all the different monkeys, so there's a bunch of them there, okay, and humans took different paths. This right here, this kind of fork in the road, that is the common ancestor, whatever it might be, between humans and monkeys. And we have found a lot of the common ancestors that were before humans and monkeys, but we haven't found all of them. So we're limited with knowing what the common ancestors are because we don't find all the fossils of these different species because they were from so long ago. All right. Okay, so we're going to talk about Darwin's finches a little bit. Finches, they're just a species of bird. And remember, guys, the Galapagos Islands were not just one island. They were a bunch of different islands. So what Darwin found was that, okay, I got a bunch of finches, and they all look pretty much the same, but there are some differences in these finches. He noticed mainly in the beaks of the finches. Some of them had really big beaks. Some of them had really small beaks. So here's some of the beaks of the finches. And what he found was on different islands that each island had a finch with some different type of beak. And he found that some of these birds with, we'll just say like this one right here, all right, that is a very big beak. He found that in the areas where the birds with the big beaks were located, those islands had a lot of seeds, things that the bird would need to crush. However, in other islands, we found these little beaks where the insects might put their beak into a flower or some kind of plant and get nectar. So they didn't need to crush the seeds open. What he also found was that on those islands with the big beak birds, they had a lot of seeds on there, but they had very little flowers. These islands with the bird with the small beak, they had a whole lot of flowers and stuff like that, but not so many seeds. So what Darwin was thinking was that, okay, well, the birds are on these different islands based on the food source that is available. So if the bird is on an island with a bunch of flowers, it makes sense that they're going to have a small beak. There's no seeds on there, so why would a bird with a big beak be on the island with all the flowers? It wouldn't make much sense. So every island had its own food source, and the finches kind of went along with that food source. Now, there's two different ways we can think about this. We could say that, okay, we have this food source, and we have that certain type of bird there. We could say that, okay, they could have had all the birds there at one time, and the birds just stayed on this island. Let's use the flowers for an example. So we know that any bird, if it's flowers, they're going to get the nectar from these flowers. The birds with the big beaks could have stayed there, but they would have died. So we could think of it as they stayed there, they died, all these big beak birds, and the ones that thrived were the ones with the small beaks. That's one way to think of it. The other way to think of it is the big beak birds were over there, and they're like, hey, there's no food here, I don't want to die, so I'm going to fly to another island. So two different ways of thinking about these things. What we think first, though, before all that happened, was that all these finches, or a finch, lived in South America, and then they flew over to the Galapagos Islands. And what happened is, after they flew to the Galapagos Islands, they found these different food sources, and they started to change over thousands of years based on the food source that they like. So some birds got bigger beaks, some birds got smaller beaks. In reality, guys, maybe one bird had that mutation for a smaller beak, so that bird reproduced a lot, and the other birds did not, obviously. So based on evolution, guys, it goes on this theory of natural selection. So natural selection states that individuals who are better adapted to the environment will, one, they'll survive, and two, they will reproduce. So natural selection, I'm actually going to write this down because this is important here. Natural selection shapes or leads to evolution. Okay, so when we have, sorry, English is not great there. There we go. Okay. So when we have natural selection shaping evolution, what do I mean by this? Here's what I mean. Let's go back to Lamarck's giraffe example. So we had short neck giraffes, and we had long neck giraffes. Okay. What happened here was the short-necked giraffes, they were unable to get food. The long-necked giraffes were able to get food. What this meant was the short-necked giraffes, they had a gene for this short neck. The long-necked giraffes did not have this gene for short neck. They had the gene for the long neck. So they were able to get food based on this different gene. Now, when this occurred and they were trying to get their food, the short-necked giraffes were obviously unable to get food. They were unable to give themselves any kind of, nutrition or anything like that. So the short-necked giraffes died. In dying, they took their genes for this short neck with them. The long-necked giraffes, they were able to get food, they were able to survive, they were also able to reproduce. When they reproduced, they passed on this gene for long neck. So this is a perfect example of natural selection. What happened was the environment acted on this gene. So that is natural selection. The short-necked giraffes dying, so that gene going away over time, and the long-necked giraffes surviving and reproducing. Once natural selection occurs, so the short-necked giraffes dying, the long-necked giraffes surviving, that is when evolution happens. So we are evolving to actually get rid of that short-neck gene and to keep that long-neck gene, which is why we see a lot of giraffes now with long necks, and we don't see many with the short necks anymore. Why? Because they, all died. So in order for natural selection to occur, we are going to have a few different things in order for this to happen. The first one is called overproduction. So we have to have more offspring produced than are able to survive. Okay. So here's how I think about this one, guys. I got a bunch of cars here, okay? Some of them are going to do really well. Some of them, I don't know if you ever heard the name. It's called a lemon. It's a car that just doesn't function the way it's supposed to. So some of the cars, they're going to be fine. Some of the cars are not going to be good because they're overproduced. We produce a lot of them. But if you see a car like this nice Mercedes here, they are probably not going to make a whole lot of these cars. So every one of them should run really, really well because they are taking a lot of time to make sure they all are running correctly. Okay, so natural selection kind of is more on these cars here. Second one, we got to have something different about them. That's called genetic variation. So we had two different traits for our giraffes. We had the long neck, we had the short neck. This is genetic variation. Okay, two different traits. The next one, we need to have a struggle to survive. So they're going to be competing for something. The giraffe example, I'm just sticking with that one. The long-necked giraffes were able to get food. It really wasn't much of a competition because the short-necked giraffes, they couldn't even reach up high enough. All right, so we need that to happen in order for natural selection to occur. So we have overproduction, we have genetic variation, we have a struggle to survive. We also are going to have differential reproduction. So what this means, and this is not good for humans, guys, organisms with the best adaptations are most likely to survive and reproduce. Okay, now humans, not a good example with that because humans, we pick what is the best characteristics because we can all survive as long as we get food, and it's pretty easy for humans to get food. Even if you don't have a job, we can still get food. But for humans, we kind of just in the media, okay, this is what looks good. This is what you want in a mate. This one over here, okay, doesn't look too good. You don't want that. So the media kind of influences what are desirable traits and what are not. So just to go on over production again, let's talk about sea turtles. I've seen many sea turtle habitats in my day. It's kind of interesting when you're on the beach and you see a sea turtle habitat. It's all roped off, and if you touch it, it's like a federal crime, which is crazy. But most of these sea turtles, when they are hatched, they're not going to make it to the sea. a lot of them are going to get eaten by seagulls and other things on the way. That's why turtles, they are going to have a whole lot of babies at one time, so that some of them will make it to the ocean, some of them will survive. There's a cute little example of sea turtles. If they notice they are hatching, because sea turtles, the numbers are decreasing a good bit. They have been. We're starting to actually go up because we are trying to help these organisms survive. But they will actually have people trying to guide the sea turtles to the sea so that the seagulls don't get them. And it's just a race pretty much for them. It's like, hey, am I going to make it or am I going to get eaten? Hopefully that's not going through their minds at the time, but you know. All right, so going on with genetic variation, we kind of already talked about this one as well. We got to have something different in order for natural selection to occur. If everything is the same with an organism, there's no genetic variation. That means natural selection cannot occur. If natural selection cannot occur, that means evolution also cannot occur. So here's a variation, guys. I mean, you guys see this nice big deer here. He's got very big rack. So that is something different than a smaller rack, okay? It doesn't have to be having, antlers and not having antlers. So the females are going to want to reproduce with the deer with the largest antlers or the largest rack. So those genes for large rack are going to be passed on. Now here's the weird thing, okay? What's happening now is hunters want the deer with the largest rack. So if they have this, sorry guys, I got interrupted there. But anyway, so what we're finding now is because of hunters, they want the biggest rack. They're finding that the deer are actually slowly decreasing the size of their rack because that actually does promote survival away from hunters. So kind of interesting. Another completely different with antlers, but another one there for you guys. Okay. So next one, struggle to survive. We already talked about this one, guys. I'm not going to go over this one anymore. I think we're good there. So this one, we talked about humans are really, really bad examples of this, but I do want to mention just the second bullet here. These adaptations that are desirable over time will become more frequent in the population, changing the population. Now, this will eliminate genetic variation a little bit over time, but hopefully we get some kind of mutation over the thousands of years where it actually promotes more genetic mutation. Okay, so just so you guys know, with natural selection, it acts on traits. It doesn't act on the whole individual. It just acts on traits that individual has, okay? All right. So let's stop here today, guys. We got to go a little bit more of natural selection to go over, but I think that's enough for the day. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.